Well, I am back. Hello, my friends. This is going to be hopefully brief video um, called This Week in the MCU. I did two of these a few months ago. I usually only can do them when I've seen something that is worth talking about, but not for like a whole video review. And there's other news and or trailers. So in this case, I've got all three. So let's start out with um, Moon Knight. So Moon Knight is on its third episode. The fourth episode will drop in 2 days. Actually, one day and a few hours. Um, but anyway, I've watched the first three. I really like the show. I think in some parts of the internet, the fanbro zone, it's getting slugged. It's not getting decimated like Morbius. Morbius, they're just stepping on him, kicking him while he's down, breaking his teeth, his fangs, whatever. And but man, Moon Knight, yeah, I don't know. We'll see if he comes out on top. I love the show. Here's the deal. So, um, basically it's Stephen Grant. He's a British, nebbish, nerdy kind of guy. I don't know if you can say those words anymore and be politically correct, but he wasn't a geek because, well, I guess he was a geek in a way because he has a passion for Egyptology, apparently, and so he works at this gift shop at this museum. So, anyway, most of the show's set, and that part's set in Britain, his little story. Then we'll move over to Egypt in the next episode. So, he ends up getting chased by all these kind of assassins, and they're working for Arthur Harrow, played by Ethan Hawke. I recently rewatched First Reformed, and I thought he was superb in that. To adjust this a little bit. Uh, that one catches some stick with some people, older fans, because it is an uncredited remake of Winter Light. I mean, if you watch interviews with Paul Schrader, the director, he will eventually say that in some of them. And I saw Winter Light after First Reformed. And yeah, it's definitely a remake. But the whole ecological, anti-corporate, suicide bomb thing, that's all new. But all the other kind of backgrounds and layers, and even some of the scenes, like between him and the woman he had a brief affair with, they're just a lot like the original. Anyway, I still love the movie, and it's my favorite A24. I have reviewed it on this channel a long time ago. So that got me interested in Ethan Hawke kind of all over again. I wasn't that fond of him as a child actor. I mean, he's okay, but as a young actor, like 20s ish, he took roles that I just particularly did not care for. I think the first role I saw him in where I felt kind of sympathetic toward him may have been Training Day. Is that right? Antoine Fuqua. It was a big movie, but I was curious about it because Denzel plays like a really dastardly cop, and I thought this is a little bit against type for him. So I watched it. Denzel and Ethan were both great, but overall it wasn't a super memorable film. Um, but yeah, so he's Arthur Harrow. He's like a cult leader who's committed to this Egyptian goddess Amet. I can't remember if that's a real goddess or not in the mythology of their pantheon. I forgot. But I will say this: there's a fictional to the MCU and to the Marvel universe god in the pantheon called Khonshu, Khonshu. So Khonshu is the motivating character of this whole saga. Khonshu was basically like locked away for a long time because the gods withdrew from human affairs due to lack of worship at some unspecified time in the past. And Khonshu, though, he really wanted to keep going, and his main thing was the moon is his kind of symbol, his whatever. If you were in astrology, that would be this, the moon is what the planet that dominates him, and He's really into kind of vengeance on wrongdoers and this kind of stuff. Now, Ethan Harrow is kind of like this too. He's kind of like weeding out people. So he has these little healing festivals. Is that what I was going to call them? Faith healing fests. That's what I meant to say. And instead of healing them, he'll just be like, "Here, sister," and then they'll keel over. So Steven's a little disturbed by this. Steven's a very sensitive lad, very sensitive. I really like this performance. It's a very kind of cliche, kind of British, almost Dickensian accent, and even Oscar Isaac kind of made fun of his own accent in this little clip I saw with him and Ethan Harrow. I mean, oops, Ethan Harrow. That's a character in a Steve Gerber book. Arthur Harrow, Ethan Hawke. I'll probably do that 20 times in this. But he's like, the big compelling quote you keep hearing in the original preview trailers. He's like, I can't tell the difference between dream and me waking life. It's something like that. I'm not doing it. I can't tell the difference between dreams and me waking life. I'm not doing it quite as well as I should. I'm not as good as Oscar Isaac. But anyway, I like Steven. He's not an annoying nerd character. He's not the kind where you want to slap and go, dude, come on. It's not like that at all. So he's more like, damn, I wish this guy would catch a break. So eventually, Ethan, here we go, Ethan Hawke, Arthur Harris, cultists or whatever, they are trying to kill him. They know him as Mark Spector. And basically, Arthur used to be an avatar of Khonshu and perform these acts of vengeance and humanity. And it kind of like drove him mad. He had kind of a codependent, toxic relationship with good old Khonshu. Hawke's playing this one kind of close to the vest. He's grown his hair long, which of course I like. His hair's about the same length as mine, actually, so he has a lot more up here. And he looks great. Now that he's older and he's a little grizzled, and these lines here, he's got a lot of pathos in his face. I just learned 2 days ago that he won 16 Best Actor awards worldwide for First Reformed. That kind of blew my mind. But anyway, proud of the guy. So I've read interviews with him about Moon Knight, and he's pretty excited to get into it. He said he was happy that it didn't have tons of links to the existing, very complex Marvel Cinematic Universe. So he felt a little freer to kind of develop his character. His character is a kind of a polyglot. He's a conflation of 3 of Moon Knight's characters, all adversaries. One is this recent character. I keep getting his name wrong. I should have looked it up. I do this all the time. I'm sorry, guys. I really try to give you guys as much accurate information as possible, but I'm not going to give you any inaccurate information. I'll just say I don't know. I don't remember. I was lazy. So that's one. Pick one for that. I think his name was like something like Shadow Knight or something like that. He was like a darker Moon Knight. I think he had like a darker costume. He was like kind of an opposite number of Moon Knight that had also gotten power from Khonshu. Then there's this character, Mark Spector, Moon Knight, Stephen Grant, same guy. Mark Spector is the base identity. We'll get to that in a minute. It all started with Mark Spector, who's a mercenary. Mark Spector's brother also gained some powers, and they become kind of opposite numbers. And then there was a character called just Arthur Harrow, but he was kind of a minor villain in Moon Knight's lore, and he didn't have any connections with the Egyptian, mythology and all that. So this is a nice little corner of the MCU we haven't seen before. Another pantheon of gods. We were first introduced to the Egyptian pantheon after all the Asgardians, of course, in Black Panther. In the beginning, the goddess Bast kind of blessed Wakanda in ancient times. So now we meet in this new series, we meet Khonshu. Khonshu is, like I said, a fictional to the MCU universe and Marvel universe god. And like I said, he's he wasn't mentioned. The story I think is cool is he wasn't. I think this is only in the show, but I might be wrong. It wasn't mentioned because he was locked away for his crimes. It was probably in the comic book. So our man Steven, he starts getting flashes, and when he's waking up, he's somewhere he doesn't know where he is, or he's beating the living shit out of people. It's a pretty bloody show at times, I gotta say, for Disney. I'm they're growing up, man. The mouse is maturing because all the Netflix shows R-rated Marvels are now on Disney Plus, but you had to put like a parental control if you don't want younger people to see that nasty content. So, and the whole thing is like Stephen Grant thinks it's a case of mistaken identity. He thinks he's going insane. It basically strongly hints that he has dissociative identity disorder. And they do kind of a cool black click flashing, quickly shimmering when he transitions to Steven back to Steven waking up and where am I? But we'll get into the transitions again later with Mark himself. So we don't really meet Mark himself until we see him in the mirror, briefly talking to Steven in the end for episode 1. And he is, of course, they're both played by Oscar Isaac. Okay, obviously. But Oscar Isaac uses his regular accent for Mark Spector. And he releases Moon Knight at the very end. And it's pretty awesome. It kind of comes onto him in like bandages like a mummy. It's it's one of the most faithful comics accurate costumes I think the MCU has rendered to date. They've been getting better and better with this. Occasionally they'll do something dodgy, but they take more care of trying to keep iconic stuff as is. So Moon Knight's costume is all white, but it's a very, very slight kind of gray shadowing on it. And it is evocative of a mummy. Khonshu also is evocative of a mummy. So, you get that Khonshu was trapped in the pyramid and I guess mummified. So Moon Knight is kind of like that, but it has all the moon symbols, the hood. It doesn't have the original real hood like people wear like on hoodies, but it has this modified one they came up with in recent years that has this big sharp thing in the middle, which I thought was like a artistic liberty. And I especially hated David Finch's art on Moon Knight. And oops, heresy, comic book heresy there. Didn't like David Finch's artwork. I saw him at a comic convention one time. I didn't like his artwork either. He was a nice guy. I thought he was just doing that, to be stylized, because his stuff is like all stylized. There's hardly any drawing. There's just tons of lines that connect somehow. And people, their brain creates closure. I'm not really into that style of comic art. That having been said, that's incorporated into the hood and a moon on top of it. It's a great costume. His eyes glow pure white. So, are we going to have a guy whose masks magically comes off all the time, like Iron Man's and Spider-Man's, etc., so we can see more of the actor? I was hoping not. We'll get to episode 3. So, Moon Knight kicks ass, and eventually, this chick, Layla, who was a lover of Mark Spector, she finds Stephen Grant. He turns back into Mark Spector. He tries to explain what the hell's going on. He'd never told her about Stephen or that he was living in London under this identity. We still don't know exactly why. And we don't know exactly if this is true psychological DID or if this is something inflicted by Khonshu or what it is. But by episode 3, we start to get some answers. And we do learn more about Arthur Harrow, and we meet the other avatars, the avatars of the other Egyptian gods, Osiris and the whole gang. And they're just like regular people, but they're filled with the power and speak for and can be spoken through by the gods themselves, channeling. It's a cool scene. They have like a little quorum inside one corner of a pyramid, and they get Mark Spector in there. Of course, they're not happy with him because he's Khonshu's avatar, and they don't like Khonshu. Khonshu speaks through um, Mark. And Arthur Harrow's there, and because Mark has demanded that Arthur Harrow be basically judged as transgressing against the Pantheon because he's trying to defile the sarcophagus or whatever, the sepulcher. That's not right either. General idea. Those are cool words. Where Amit is interred. So I don't know if it's our physical body or whatever, but they say there's no evidence of this, and they give Arthur a free pass after he's had a chance to vent his, feelings about being basically psychologically raped by Khonshu all for years, which is really kind of what is informing his lust for power with Amit, because with Amit, he wants to be able to get the godly power on his own terms and control it rather than it controlling him. So that's his, I think, primary motivation as a villain. And the cult and slaying people, it's kind of like now he's just basically doing the Moon Knight vengeance thing, but he's doing it in an indiscriminate way. So I guess Amit was really a mean goddess. Kind of like Kali or something, destructive, I guess. I mean, Kali's cool, but I'm just saying. I have a friend who worships Kali, actually. So, yeah, and we do see him go back and forth with identities in the third one. In the second one, Steven's trying to not let Mark surface because Mark's so violent, and Mark's trying. Khonshu's like, don't let Steven surface. He's an idiot. So Khonshu's played by F. Murray Abraham. He does the voice. Great voice. And the relationship between Khonshu and Moon Knight is exactly like what's been in the comics for at least the last 20 or 30 years. There's been a bunch of current relaunches. When I say current, I mean millennial, because I stopped collecting Marvel again in like 2005, and I stopped kind of really following them around 2007. Though later I did pick up some other things and learn some things, like from the Comics Explained site. I learned a lot of recent stuff. The Mary Marvelite site. I'm recommending both these channels, by the way. You're on YouTube, so look them up and subscribe. Learned a lot of recent stuff from them. And then the only real works that I really heavily got into since that period were Ed Brubaker's long run on Daredevil. I picked up most of that. After that, I'm like, nah, after 2011, 2012, I don't really mess with Marvel. But I will get back to something tied into that in a minute when I get to the next topic. So, yeah, I mean, you kind of really see Layla and Mark and Steven's like kind of bothering him every time he sees a reflection. Steven's talking to him, and I guess it's supposed to be humorous. I mean, it kind of is, but they try to get into some kind of tomb and get some kind of like star chart, to I guess to countervene, is that the word? The emergence of Ami, kind of astrological. And Steven's like a geek. He knows more about this actually than Mark. It's kind of interesting. But he becomes Moon Knight because the people whose place he's at, they realize that he's against Arthur Harrow and Ami. So he turns into Moon Knight, and when he turns into Moon Knight, he not every time, but one of the first times in episode 2, Khonshu says, "Summon the suit," and you haven't seen him in the Moon Knight regalia since the end of episode 1. And when he does that, he's in the Steven persona, and Steven's messed up, and so he summons a different suit. It's like a real suit, and just a mask with no hood. The same mask, same glowy eyes, and this kind of fancy dandy suit that's all white. And that is a character also from Marvel Comics. Mr. Knight is a 5th personality for Moon Knight that was introduced in very recent years, maybe in the last 5 or 6 years. I read some of those recent ones recently on Comics Explained page, and I did think that series was above average for Marvel, so good job, Marvel. Anyway, comics, I mean. So yeah, so Mr. Knight, the way they've rigged it here is Mr. Knight is when he's Steven, he turns into Mr. Knight when he summons the suit. And he still has the same powers, and he's not quite getting used to them. And of course, he's kind of nerdy when he uses them and ends up hurting some bad guys. And he's like, well, this is cool, you know. That's not what he said, really, but I can't remember his phraseology. I think he used some British slang terms. So by episode 3, he summons the suit, and Mark does in this situation I was describing a moment ago, or several moments ago. And this is the first real extended action scene you see of Moon Knight in costume. And it's pretty incredible, and he's got the little moons that are sharp that will, kill people, kind of like the and Batman has the batarangs, and Robin has I don't know what they're called, the Robinarangs. Basically, ninja throwing stars, essentially the idea. So his are shaped like moons, and they're razor sharp, and he kills quite a few people with them. They go in their neck, and blood comes out, and they drop. And it's that's just the way he is. He's not like a Captain America, type who's like, don't kill anybody, or even Daredevil, don't kill anybody. Moon Knight's like, kill everybody. And I mean, as long as they're bad guys, just kill them all. And he's sort of evolved that way over the years in the comic book to being that way too, for the most part. Because Khonshu's an angry god, he demands satisfaction. Let me describe Khonshu real quick. So Khonshu, came to the story, the THOR in the story, prominently in the comics, I guess around the mid to late 80s. I was still collecting Marvel. I loved the character Moon Knight. Moon Knight had been in Werewolf by Night, which I liked. That's where he was introduced, and more on him later. And then he was a member of the Defenders briefly. Loved that. Written by my deceased friend and person I'm really a fan of still, and David Kraft. I've talked about him. His widow donated to my fundraiser. That was a good take on Moon Knight. And then, of course, Doug Minch, the creator, partnered with a young Bill Sienkiewicz when he was still kind of in a strongly Neil Adams imitative art style. But he evolved quickly to the 80s and just exploded, as we all know. And they did a series together, and it was one of these series that Marvel designated as special, being you could only buy them in comic shops. I don't know if they were printed on better paper or not, but they were touted as something special. One of the 3 titles was the Micronauts, which I personally do not think deserved that honor. That's just me, though. Okay, but the others were Bruce Jones and Brent Anderson's Kazar and Shanna, the She-Devil, and Zabu. Don't forget Zabu. That was a great series, and that was really kind of a step forward for Marvel. And I think Moon Knight was too. I think those 2 series together really. They were highlights of the 80s. I'll be honest, I did not collect either of them when they were first run. I have read all the Moon Knights. I have not read that whole Kazar series, but I love Kazar. Don't expect to see him in the MCU. I can't see that happening. So where were we? Oh yeah. So Khonshu, there was a series in the mid to late 80s called, I forget what year, called Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu. And they slightly redesigned his costume, and they gave him some gold paneling and an ankh, and I didn't really like it. I didn't like the direction. The art was good, and I don't remember who did the art. God, I almost remember his name, but I can't. It's not Val Myrick. That would have been cool if it was Val Myrick, because he drew The Living Mummy, which Steve Gerber created. So I was put off by the whole concept, the redefinition of him. But years later, as the years passed, well, Moon Knight was a member of the West Coast Avengers for a little while, and I was collecting it then. And in hindsight, I've reread some of those books because I'm selling them all. And that series is kind of weak, I think. Especially the art is very weak. But Moon Knight popped up and joined, and he kind of had more of his Dave Kraft pinned personality and a little of the Doug Minch. He didn't really, but he had the Fist of Khonshu like costume. But starting from then on, when because he never seemed to be able to sustain a long comic series of his own, He would get these miniseries, and some that lasted longer than others. And from then on, pretty much the iconography and mythology, the deep connection with Khonshu established in the Fifth of Khonshu book is now kind of iconic to that character. It's endemic to that character. So obviously, it drives this show. I mean, Khonshu is kind of the prime mover of the events in this show. And I mentioned the Khonshu has is voiced by Abraham F. Murray Abraham, who's excellent, obviously from uh, Amadeus and Scarface and Star Trek Insurrection and 5 million more movies I haven't seen. But yeah, he's tall and lanky. He's very tall and lanky, and he's got the kind of white, grayish mummy kind of wrappings and some symbols, like Moon Knight. I think his is the I haven't looked too closely, but the old drawings of him that we've seen, he kind of had the pharaoh's hat and a bird head and a human body. Uh, like with most of the Egyptian gods had an animal head, and that big animal head with a crest, and then they had like this kind of body. They were usually holding some kind of staffs, and Khonshu has this long staff, and it's got a moon at the top. So he's pretty much right out of the comic books, but actually he looks even better because they kind of did a David Lynch. They kind of went with instead of trying to overly stylize something by translating the otherworldliness of it, scaled it more to a primitive kind of uh, a primitive imagery that anyone would recognize, and therefore it makes it powerful because it's a juxtaposition of his head on his body. That's kind of a surrealist kind of thing visually. And they did it kind of like that in the sense that they didn't kind of create this big stylized bird head. You know what I mean? They actually have his head is this giant bird, almost like a pterodactyl, it's a giant bird skull. And it's not attached to his body directly. It's like floating above his body. But you start to see there's like these little strings, and that's not effects slip up, but that's kind of his neck, I guess. So it gives you that kind of wonky, like surreal look at every time you look at him, and I think it increases the power of the character and the visual. So really love the visual design of the show and where it's going. And basically, Khonshu kind of helps them try to do something to figure the star map out I was talking about, and uh, uses this power unwisely. And the other avatars that I mentioned earlier pass judgment on him finally again, and again imprison him. He's inside of one of the little totems, which I just described with the little real bird head and the, whatever, like a pharaoh being buried. Um, and Khonshu says as he's going away, he's like, I will be imprisoned again, but Mark Spector must free me. And so I guess that's obviously going to be a mission of Mark's. So, Mark and Layla it's a mess. And in the Steven identity, Layla gives him a couple of kind of looks. And I thought it was pretty cool because obviously she's in love with Mark, but Mark's hid a lot of secrets from her, including that Steven existed and more over the years. And but as Steven, he's really friendly and gentlemanly and gentle. So he still looks like a hunky Oscar Isaac, but he's got this sweet personality. So she's kind of looking at him like, whoa, I could stick with this guy as long as I keep him, Steven, and keep Mark, out of the picture. But so I hope that'll develop into something. Her character, I don't know from the comics. Beautiful actress. I'm not sure what ethnicity, or beautiful olive skin and long black curly hair. But in the comic books, his girlfriend was Marlene Elrona, and whose father was an Egyptologist, and that played into Mark's origin closely with the discovery of the tomb of Khonshu. All we have with Malayla is she referenced something that happened to your father that Mark Spector says to her, and that's kind of what's driving her to figure all this mess out with Amit. You have to pay close attention to the plot. I've only watched each episode one time. I think I would recommend watching each one of them twice because there are a lot of details, obviously, that I can't even really remember. I mean, that would make the plot more clear. To some people, that makes it talky and slow, but the actions and the flow are really good. I mean, it's not a boring show, and some people think it is. It's actually a very dynamic show. Visually, it's very inventive. I really like it so far. So far, it has manifested two links to the MCU. Even though the critics who got the first 4 episodes, a whole bunch of them said there are absolutely no connection to the MCU in them, but they're not these nuts like us who geek out over every little Easter egg. I'm sure there are other ones that I could find on people's videos online, but the only blatant one is they mentioned Madripoor in episode 3, and of course that is a locale that originated in the X-Men mythos, but it introduced into the MCU in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and it's a place probably where the now evil Sharon Carter, aka the Power Broker, is still headquartered. That's where she was operating primarily. Uh, some people think she's going to pop up in the show by the end. I don't know. I don't know if they're actually going to go to Madripoor, but you know how fan bros are. They're like, oh, they mentioned Madripoor, so that means they're going to go to Madripoor. They're going to meet Power Broker. Also, Wolverine's probably going to be brought in because he's in Madripoor in the comic, and then Hugh Jackman's going to play him again. And this is kind of the madness fan bro speculation. So I like Moon Knight. Oh, the other Easter egg, by the way, was one of Kang, one of the Harrow's kind of foot soldiers, is has a jacket with a graphic that's evocative of Kang and Rama Tut. Kang is a different alternate self called Rama Tut, and Rama Tut was an Egyptian. And so Kang was actually another previously heretofore unknown pharaoh that Kirby and Lee created. And but that was one of Kang's conquering, uh, identities. He has several, and I'm sure we'll see more of that manifest in the next Ant-Man movie, and they'll probably hint at some of it, hopefully in the Doctor Strange, maybe not. So that was my first little thing. So the second thing is I watched the Thor: Love and Thunder trailer. I really loved it. It had a great vibe. It used the Guns N' Roses "Sweet Child of Mine" song, which using it as the beginning, the beginning of that song, Slash actually deliberately mimicked the exact guitar tone and sound of Robert Fripp on a song of David Bowie's on Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, though I can't remember which one now. But and even some of the chords are almost identical, but I prefer the Fripp Bowie song. Sweet Child of Mine is okay for what it is. I mean, it was definitely an 80s anthem. And I think there's definitely an 80s little flavor that's running through Taika Waititi's work, especially the Thor movies, a visual thing. But in this, he's really that was the song in the trailer. Chris Hemsworth's eyes are more blue than ever. He has scars from where he lost his one eye. That was a good touch. He's lost his weight. And it's hard to tell from the trailer what happens in what order. A whole bunch of different events are shuffled around, but it moves pretty briskly. You really have to kind of know. You watch this one a few times, maybe frame by frame, and I'm sure there's Easter eggs I have no clue are in there. I'm just going to tell you what I gleaned from it as quickly as I can and concisely, which I have problems with. We get Korg again. The Cronin, who was voiced by Taika Waititi. Some scenes he's like Thor's buddy, sidekick. Some scenes Thor has, his more or less standard costume in the movies, and then in other scenes he has a different costume, which is pretty similar to that of Thunderstrike, a character who was kind of a knockoff of Thor, a guy named Eric Masterson who gained the powers of Thor with the hammer for a while in the 90s. There were a few of those legacy characters in the 90s, like U.S. Agent, who began as a replacement for Captain America. He was kind of a faux Captain America. He exists in the MCU. We were introduced to him in Falcon and Winter Soldier as John Walker, the new Captain America, but at the end he does become the U.S. Agent. But yeah, there were a bunch of characters like that, and Thunderstrike was a prominent one. I don't know whatever happened to that character. But it's cool to see that woven into the mythos. He's wielding Stormbreaker still. Captain America took Mjolnir back to where Thor had plucked it from when they were in, long back in time doing the time thing in the Endgame. So, yeah, that's an interesting angle. I've heard somebody call that design of Thor Ravager Thor, and he leads a little group of Ravagers. Kind of like the Ravagers, the Ravagers, yes, the same ones in Guardians of the Galaxy. That was like I don't know how to put it exactly. There was another group that existed in that story, and it was where Yondu was originally from, and Yondu, raised Peter Quill. And in the second Guardians of the Galaxy, Yondu is kind of more a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy than the Ravagers. And we do see some of the Ravagers, and they're all original comic book Guardians of the Galaxy, which other than Yondu have not been in this series. This at the end, and then post credits and a deleted scene, we see the MCU's version of those characters. And there, one thing I will say is cool is one of them is played by Michelle Yeoh, so that was kind of her first Marvel thing. So I guess Thor is continuing from Endgame, and then of course it's going to lead us into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I hope the Guardians of the Galaxy won't be too prominent in this movie because I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of them. Very few of the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy I care for. I like Rocket Raccoon, of course. I like Groot to a point. He can be annoying. And that's it. I don't really like any of the other characters. I don't like the way they were translated into film, and I strongly dislike their obnoxious personalities. And I know that's the point, but I think it's gotten a little out of control, personally. Let Gunn do his third movie, and then let's retire that, or let's have them appear in cameos, or better yet, why don't we just kill off Peter Quill altogether? I'll be so happy about that. So Gamora's not going to be in the group. The time displaced Gamora, because the modern Gamora is still dead. So yeah, so there's a couple scenes, with the Guardians of the Galaxy and Peter Quill, and kind of a silly, one of the many Peter Quill Thor kind of, macho competitions, and this one has kind of this homoerotic thing going on in it, which just kind of seems to be the joke. I guess that's like to the fan bros who are like, yeah, man, they should hook up. And there are a lot of them. I'm sure there's pages and pages of slash fic about Star-Lord and Thor from the MCU hooking up. So what are some other great parts? Thor has a ship, which is like a old Viking ship with a big prow, and it's pulled by Tooth Grinder and Tooth Gnasher. This is from the comics and from mythology. Those two goats or horse-like goats or whatever were introduced, I believe, by Walt Simonson in his run, and that was very cool. The way they have it kind of, and it also it's floating over New Asgard, which is also kind of from the comics, where you had New Asgard. I mean, Asgard, after it had been reassembled, it was a few years ago in the comics when Straczynski was writing it, and it's like floating above like Oklahoma or something, and but it has its own jurisdiction because Tony Stark tries to rope it in legally and control it, because that's when all that Civil War trash in the comics was going on. I love the movie, but I don't like the comic series. And during that period, they had made Tony Stark into a radical right-wing, anti-freedom villain. And he tries to tell Thor. That's a good scene. He tries to tell Thor, look, you can't be up there. We got to register you guys. And Thor beats the living fuck out of him and breaks his armor. That was pretty nice. Because it was long coming. Going back to the movie incarnation, so it's like above New Asgard, which we know is kind of like in Scandinavia, and then now Valkyrie is like the ruler. I don't know if she's considered a queen or whatever. Korg and all those guys are still hanging out, and there's a picture where a bunch of people are meeting in a boardroom and wearing suits, and Valkyrie's wearing this really cool suit, and it's tailored, it's kind of androgynous the way it's tailored, and looks cool. And then Meek has a suit too. He's back. He's in a suit too. One explanation video I watched today, actually I only watched one, claims that the boardroom scene may have been Roxxon Corporation. I think it's really more, I could be wrong. It could be Roxxon Corporation, but I think it is a meeting that has something to do with the business or legality or development, what have you, going forward of New Asgard as its own sovereign nation. That's my guess, but I will bet you that's what it's about. But it could be Roxxon. Maybe they're going to go and pollute New Asgard, like the rest of the planet. And so also, there's a lot of great visual touches. There's a scene where Thor is aging through the years. He's like a kid running through the trees, becoming a man, and each swipe he's older. So he's a kid, and he's like a teenager, though who knows, he could have been several hundred years old when he looked like this. And he has the original Marvel costume, and I guess that's the only time we're going to see it. It's not Hemsworth, it's a younger, leaner, but somewhat muscular, guy. I think it's that the young incarnation of Thor. And then he runs through, and you see the familiar one with the armor with all the scales on it that was designed during Straczynski's run and utilized early in Thor's film appearances, but hasn't really been used much since. They've gone back to the classic bare arms for Thor with the wristbands, which of course I prefer. There's a lot of, kind of philosophical musings by Hemsworth in the dialogue and over the narration. And I kind of saw that was the direction they were going to go in. Thor's going to find himself. And so he's just like traveling all over the place, I guess all over the universe. There is a brief shot of Russell Crowe's Zeus. So we'll be introducing the Greco-Roman pantheon in this one. And it's not a full frontal, it's from the back. And he's got this cheesy looking lightning bolt. And it kind of reminds me of Flash Gordon, another 80s thing. And I'm sure that's probably deliberate. And Taika Waititi is still doing the really gaudy colors with the logo for Thor Love and Thunder and some of the costumes, with really bright, strong like blue and red and purple and yellow, and it's very neonish, which is very 80s. And there's a lot of Kirby-ish kind of things. There's a lot of little touches that you're like, wow, that's just from the comic books. Just a lot of things. Too many, obviously, for me to remember right now. I should have jotted all down before the video. But this is just, a conversation between me and you, and just, I'm a lay person who's really, I think I'm a comics authority, at least on mainstream comics. But I don't have a degree in it, unfortunately. But I know what I'm talking about. But I'm still a lay person. I'm not a member of the comic book industry, even though I do work on my own comic books. So, to me, this is just, hey, this is what I took away from it. I'm not the frantic fanboy who will go through every shot, which is not bad. I like it when they go through every shot and point out legit Easter eggs. Like I said earlier, they don't want to stop there. They didn't want to kind of write their own fanfic. Just speculation is what's happening, and I've talked about this in this channel probably more than enough. But I hate that world. I'm not a part of that world. But it incurs on my world, with my geekishness from time to time. So I have to punch back. So finally, the trailer ends with Mjolnir flying through the air, and it's got cracks, so it's been reassembled somehow, and lands in the hands of Jane Foster. And she looks exactly like Thor. She became Thor for a time in the comics in the 2010s. And I will say that's one of the few Marvel comics I also read a bit of. The art by this guy named, I can't remember his first name, his last name is like Dodderman. I love his style. It's just so unusual. It's kind of like when I first saw Frank Quitely's art. It's just very peculiar and quirky and minimalist lines, and weird kind of renderings and shapes. I really love it. So he did that whole run. Oh, the writer was Jason Aaron. They did the whole run where Jane Foster becomes Thor. So it's going to happen. So you're going to have two Thors. And funny, the poster has him like atop this big mountain or whatever, and he's got Stormbreaker and there's lightning, and he's wearing the Ravager / Thunderstrike outfit. And hold on, I got a something here. And so where was I? Just a friend of mine had something that sounds important, but I think I can wrap this up before. Yeah, so he's in the Thunderstrike garb, and the poster says the one and only, scrawled above Thor and Thor: Love and Thunder. So of course, that's, I guess, another joke that he's not the one and only Thor. I'm excited. What about you? Leave, as Russell Brand says, leave it in the comments below. And as he also says, please like and subscribe, my followers, my awakening wonders. If you're a free thinker, independent thinker, critical thinker / socio-political buff / satire lover / far leftist socialist type person, any or all of the above, which I'm pretty much all of the above, I suggest you subscribe to Russell Brand. I've become obsessed with his videos. He's not what he used to be, and he's not what a lot of people think he is. He's going in a very strong and radical direction, and it's scaring a lot of people in the establishment, as well it should. But anyway, he always kind of, does this big wavy hands thing and the great British accent. But I do want you to I don't always say nobody, but more people are watching certain of my videos, and they're not putting a like on it. I've said before, do you not like it? I know it's hard to get into the habit. But my videos will disappear in the algorithms, especially when I'm talking about something that other people are talking about, like Moon Knight or Marvel or Morbius. But, more people like it, more people will see it recommended, more people will see it, more views will happen, more likes. It's just this snowball effect. It's just this way they've structured things, like to weed out the weak, so the strong get to become stronger and you keep pushing the weak aside. So I'm sorry, it's survival of the fittest. I'm not trying to diss anybody else's, great videos on these topics. I'm not even trying to diss the many awful videos on these topics, but it's survival of the fittest, baby. So I wouldn't mind being monetized, but I have to have 1,000 subscribers. But that's not my goal. But if it happens, I'm not going to complain. So if you don't mind helping me get there, every subscriber counts, every like counts. And if you want to leave comments, that's true too. Like, hey man, here's my fan bro theory. Fuck you, mine's right. Feel free. The last Marvel thing I'm going to say is news I learned today. Apparently, there's more progress in the Blade film, and he will be kind of mentoring Dane Whitman on wielding that ebony blade. I'm really excited to see Mahershala Ali as Blade, the Vampire Slayer. That's what we in the old school know he was named. And the other thing I found out is there's going to be a Werewolf by Night Disney Plus special, and it's cast with, I can't remember get his name right, Gabriel Gale or Gabriel Gale Bernal. You know who I'm talking about. He's an actor, kind of a Javier Bardem kind of Spanish actor. Younger though. In some real life figure that was really an acclaimed movie. I'm sure he's been in other things. I'm not as familiar with him as Javier. Hope I'm saying that name right. But I knew who he was. I just can't get his name right. I should have written it down. If you guys know who he is, that's who's playing Werewolf by Night. I don't know who he's going to be. I don't know if he's going to be Jack Russell or not. All right, so I have a friend who's in dire need here, so I'm going to need to split. This is over long. That's this week in the MCU, and I've returned with videos. There she is again. And I am going to be back as soon as possible. Rock on! It didn't work! I love it when it does that. It's like a blooper. All right,